Hey YouTube, Vinny M here, and welcome to another video here on the channel. Today we have another World War II reenacting informational video for you, and in today's video we are doing part 3 in a 4-part series on period correct tobacco products for your World War II reenacting and living history needs. Today is part 3 and we'll cover tobacco and smoking accessories. In part 1 we covered cigars, in part 2 we covered cigarettes, and in part 4 we will cover pipes and pipe tobaccos. So jumping right into the topic of this video, we're going to go over all of the tobacco accessories in front of you, a little bit of history on them, a little bit of backstory, when you might have seen them, just like we've done with the other videos in the series. Now, spoiler alert, you'll notice there's a lot of black lighters in front of you. They're not all Zippos. If you're into very period correct reenacting and like Zippo lighters, you're going to find this video really interesting because the Black Crackle lighter was not exclusive to Zippo. There are 3 other brands in front of you right now who made Black Crackle lighters, and there's more than just that. I'm trying to complete my lighter collection so I can do a lighter specific video, so hopefully we'll get that done in the future. So without further ado, let's start jumping into some of these. Here we have some of the most prominent cigarette protective cases that you would have seen. We have a couple American varieties, and then we have a German made one. So with the American ones, they were typically just slide cases, and you would put your cigarettes down in it and just slide it closed. And then that would keep your cigarette soft pack from getting crushed, since all the cigarettes back then came in soft packs. Now this one right here is for your standard length cigarettes. It's made by Park Industries of Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Very, very, very common item. You can get these on eBay. And this one right here is also made by them, but this is a little bit later than World War II. At least this specific one is. This one is World War II vintage. This one is probably from the 70s. So it's the same thing, but this will accept taller cigarettes, such as the ones made by Pall Mall, which if you watched my cigarette video, Pall Mall travels the smoke further because they're a little bit longer. So this case can hold the Pall Malls that were made during World War II, and it actually has a little slider on top of it so that you can dump your cigarettes out without having to take the top off. So just a couple variations of cigarette cases that are historically accurate for World War II reenacting and living history that you might have seen with U.S. troops during that time period. Now, the German cigarette cases were much different. They looked like this. And you can still get these made brand new. They look almost exactly like the ones from World War II. And the German cases were little snap cases. They usually had a design on one side and were just textured on the back. You press a little button and it opens. And once it opens, you have little elastic bands that will hold your cigarettes. And you have to take your cigarettes out of the pack and put them down in here. And then this protects them from that point forward. What is interesting about that is that these cases almost always used elastic, which is something that we think of being a more modern material. Today, you can buy these that have a metal wing in them and a spring. But if you want to be World War II correct, you have to have the elastic or a coil spring. So let me show you. Here we have the type that has the metal wings that's incorrect for World War II reenacting. And here we have an original surviving example that contains the coil spring, which is correct, although very rare. Now, as you can see, there are some variations in these cases and how they're made, but I've never seen one that was verified to be from World War II that had the metal wings. It's always the elastic, and in a very rare instance, the coil spring. These are great for reenacting. Every time I go to a reenactment, someone has these on the German side, someone has these on the American side. These right here, in my opinion, have an advantage over the German ones in that You don't have to throw away your cigarette pack. It just goes in here. You don't have to take your cigarettes out, spend a lot of time like reorganizing them. The German one has advantages too. You have to throw your pack away and you have to get your cigarettes out and you have to sit here and stack them in here, so it's a little bit more time consuming than the American model. But once they're in there, it's much thinner, so it's much more comfortable in a pocket and takes up less space in the depth of the pocket. American troops also did get their hands on these, just a little bit more rare among the Americans over, say, the park industry style. So next on the list of tobacco accessory categories, we have pipe tools. So during World War II, this type of pipe tool right here did exist, and this is the type of pipe tool we're used to seeing today. It has a scraper blade, it has an aerating pick, and it has a tamper on it. But during World War II, this type of pipe tool was more associated with German troops than with American troops. As a matter of fact, you can find plenty of these still in original German wrappers. The way that I found out about these other two pipe tools and their existence was I was at a reenactment and I had one of these, and a guy said, you know, those are perfectly acceptable to have because U.S. troops could have taken them from German soldiers. But that's not usually what U.S. troops are seen using. And I said, well, what are U.S. troops seen using? He said, most of the time you just see them use a nail. And I'm like, okay. He said, yeah, they'll take a nail and they'll find one that has a big head on it to tamp with, and they'll just take and hammer one end flat to have a scraper, and that's what they had. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. So I get home, and me being me, I don't take anyone's word for anything. I look into it. And I found a tool online called the Amos pipe tool, which is this guy right here. And it is essentially a nail. So it has a huge head on it for tamping your tobacco, and then it has a flattened scraper head. But it is actually a proprietary tool. Like, this is manufactured this way. It's not just a modified nail. And if you want to, you can put in Amos pipe tool, and they'll come right up. You can still get them today, even on Amazon. That's where I got these. It said made in China, so I just sanded it off. I got a 3-pack for like $9. So I just sanded off made in China so that I could use it and not look out of place. So that made me wonder, is this what the U.S. troops were using, or was it really a nail? So I looked into the history of these, and these are in fact old enough to be what they were using. They are time period correct for World War II. So this is going to work much better than a nail. And then I continued that research and found out that they also had tools that looked like this back then. And this is just the same thing, but it's square, more like a horseshoe nail, and it has a little spoon built into it to scrape with. So I should have asked the guy for the photos that he was referencing when he said they were using nails. He actually said it was a picture of a Marine in the Pacific where you could clearly see it was a nail, and I never had him give me the photo, which I should have done. But in my search to find proof that they were using nails instead of these tools, I was unable to definitively find anything from World War II, but I did find a couple photos of American officers in the early 1950s using this tool right here. And one of those is Chesty Puller. Here we have Chesty Puller using one of these nail-type tools in his pipe, as well as Admiral Frank Fletcher. Unfortunately, many of the photos in World War II, the hands of the individuals obscure what is actually being used, at least for the Americans. And lastly, we have an example of the German package of the trifold tool. Next, we are going to get into lighters, and I know everybody wants to hear about Zippo and the Black Crackle lighters that we see so much in reenacting, but I'm saving the best for last. So first, I want to talk about the lighters that existed that were not Zippos. And again, hopefully, I have a big enough collection of these to do a lighter-specific video later. One of the lighters that you see from that time period is this guy right here. This is a reproduction from Amazon, and it's a pretty good reproduction when you look at the originals. This is typically seen labeled as a Bowers Army-Navy windproof lighter when you see it with its original box. Oftentimes it's just called a rope lighter or a trench lighter. Basically, it works somewhat like the Zippos that most people are used to. It has a spring in here with a flint on top, just like how a Zippo does, with a striking wheel above it. What's different is it doesn't use any fuel. There's a little cap and there's like a fish hook right here that goes into the fabric, and that's what pulls it up. And when you light this, it just smolders. It is a little finicky to get lit. All right. But if you can get it lit, it just smolders. And then to put it out, you just pull it and let that cap snuff it. So the idea with this particular lighter was that you could light your cigarette without having an open flame that would be visible to the enemy. When we see these in their original form, the rope is typically bright orange though, not white like on the reproductions, which is of some interest. So let me show you a picture of that, and also show you pictures of all of the non-Zippo style lighters that I don't have to show you, but there's a lot. You had Service lighters, you had Evans lighters, you had Ronson lighters, but let's have a look. Here we have an original surviving example of the Bowers Army Navy windproof lighter, aka the rope lighter or trench lighter, and you can see its original orange cord. Here we have more of your standard issue Service lighter. This is the Dunhill Service lighter, and pretty much the exact same design seen here, but this one's made by Parker and labeled Service lighter. Here we have a lighter made by Bowers again, and this is also a Service lighter type. Here we have Evans lighters, which are similar to Zippos or Ronsons. They did come in like that black crackle or green crackle finish, as you can see here up close. And here we have what after the war would be Zippo's main competition, the Ronson lighter. The Ronson company would eventually be bought out by Zippo. And then lastly, we have a Ronson banjo type lighter, which has a very unique shape to it. Now that we've got all the other lighters and accessories out of the way, we've saved the best for last. Let's talk about Zippo lighters, or more specifically, windproof lighters. Because while all of these are Zippos, this one is not, and it's original to World War II. Neither is this one, which is an original World War II black crackle. And neither is this one, a black crackle in its original box. That's right, many companies made Zippos that were not Zippo. Each manufacturer had their own design takes, and you can tell these lighters apart by looking at them. You just have to know what you're looking at. But the first thing we have to understand is what Zippos are correct for World War II reenacting and the World War II time period, because Zippo itself has changed over the years. In front of you are 5 Zippo manufactured lighters. This one is a 1935 replica, which Zippo still makes, and it is exact a replica as you will ever see. They actually had to mark replica on the bottom so people wouldn't sell it as an original. These 2 lighters are replicas of the Zippo made in the 1940s, just before and during World War II. And these are also so accurate a replication that Zippo had to mark them as replicas. But these are completely modern Zippos. So these Zippos are not appropriate for World War II reenacting, but only people that know what they're looking at are gonna know the difference. So what is the difference? Because if you look at this looks to be a black crackle Zippo, but it's a modern Zippo with a black crackle finish. Whereas this one is a black crackle Zippo that's made to look exactly like a non-modern 1940s Zippo. So let's have a look at what changed. The 1930s model Zippos, which is something a soldier could have had because they acquired it before the war, were very square. Square in just about every dimension. And they had their hinge plate visible on the outside of the lighter, brazen into place with a 3-barrel hinge. That's your telltale sign of a 1935. Many people will buy this lighter and think it's a 1935 because it has the same design. and it has a little bit more square corners than most of your current Zippos, but this is not an actual 1935 replica. It has the modern 5-barrel hinge that we'll see in a moment. So you have to be really careful when you're buying a Zippo, because Zippo is currently making lighters that are very, very close to each other, but not exactly the same. So let's get into that 1940 Zippo. So in the 40s, they went to a more rounded shape, and they went to a 4-barrel hinge, which is now inside the lighter with only the hinge itself being visible. So the plates are now on the inside. Now initially, these were made from brass and chrome, such as this one. But as those metals became necessary for the war effort, Zippo switched to a cheap metal that would rust. And to keep it from rusting, they coated it in this black textured finish, almost like what we think of as like a truck bed liner today. And that is what became the wartime black crackle lighter. Now, Zippos were usually not really issued lighters. They were usually bought at stores on military bases or sent overseas as care packages or something like that. But this is the one correct for the 40s. Now, this one right here kind of looks the part, right? It's a little bit more square. It's got the right finish. But the telltale sign that this is a modern one is that it's still brass. It's not made from that cheaper metal. And it has a 5-barrel hinge instead of a 4. So if we're looking at all three of them side by side, and I'll take the other one and add it in. It has a little bit different shape to it. If we look at the hinges, 1935, exterior 3-barrel. 1940s, you have the internal 4-barrel. Modern, you have internal 5 barrels. As far as shapes, we have very square for the 30s, a little bit more round for the 40s. Modern ones are either back to kind of a square shape but with rounded corners, or completely back to a square shape with just slightly rounded corners, less than this one. So you got to really pay attention. But now that we have the Zippos out of the way, who else made windproof lighters that looked like Zippos? Well, this right here is a Park Sherman Storm King. What gives it away that it's not a Zippo is that it does not have this hinge for the lid. It has a blade. Also, the insert looks different than a Zippo. It has a thick channel on it that holds it into place with that spring piece. Doesn't sound like a Zippo either. The actual chimney or barrel is pretty close though. Next, we have a Berkeley Black Crackle. This is original from the time period. The Berkeley has a 3-barrel hinge with 2 rivets holding it in. And I didn't mention that on the Park Sherman, but it has a 5-barrel hinge with 2 rivets holding it in. The Berkeley has a completely different barrel design with no part of the flint assembly visible under the wheel, like a Zippo has. It also has a built-in metal spring for the lid that functions even without the insert in place, and it's marked Berkeley windproof on the inside, and it actually has fill ports, which is different than Zippos, which just have felt on the bottom. And the fill ports are nice because your fuel can't evaporate out of this lighter. nearly as fast as it can out of a Zippo. You can see the dimensional difference in the chimneys or barrels as well. The Berkeley's is much larger. This is an original World War II Black Crackle lighter. Again, doesn't sound like a Zippo. That little foot is what produces all of the Zippo's natural noise. And lastly, we have the Zephyr windproof lighter still in its box. This is an original World War II Black Crackle, but what you'll notice is it's not black. It's actually more of a green color. The Zephyrs notoriously don't have the lids line up exactly right, and they actually have an external hinge that runs through the sides instead of being on the back. The lid only opens to 90 degrees. It has a built-in spring plate, and the lids are stamped Zephyr of Galter Manufacturing Company, Chicago, Illinois. Outside of that, they're very similar to the Zippo inserts. They have felt on the bottom, the single striker assembly, and the striker wheel sitting over the flint. Again, they don't sound like a Zippo. So next time you're at a reenactment and someone tells you that the Black Crackle lighters were Zippos, you can tell them not all of them. This Park Sherman is not Black Crackle, it's the aluminum one, because I don't have the funds to afford a Park Sherman Black Crackle. They're very expensive. But Park Sherman did make Black Crackles, and so did a company called Windy. And I was supposed to have a Windy for this video, but it got delayed in transit, and I can't hold the video off anymore because of what I have coming up in the next couple weeks. So the Windy will end up in the video of all the lighters by themselves, which is a totally separate thing. But I will show you a picture real quick of what the Windy looked like. Here is an original Black Crackle Zippo, and just so you can compare it to the others, here is the Black Crackle Zephyr, the Black Crackle Berkeley, the Black Crackle Park or Park Sherman, and the Black Crackle Windy, which has the most distinct vents in the chimney. So there you have it. Hopefully you've enjoyed it and learned something. Make sure to check out the other videos in this series. Episode 1, cigars. Episode 2, cigarettes. Episode 4, pipes and pipe tobaccos. As always, like and subscribe, and have a nice day.